Hello and welcome to this Takeda episode of the Eternal Law. On the last Takeda episode we saw the destruction of the Buddhist uprising in Owari finally being defeated by Takeda forces, who then moved on to take part in a blockade against the Ikko main force down in the Kitabatake lands. With the blockade in place, we were free to attack the strategic province of Wumi and capture it, and Takeda Nobishige was able to sneak along the north coast and capture Wakasa province. The Ikko then took revenge by attacking the Takeda navy with firebomb kaboyas, completely destroying our forces with their superior technology, but that did nothing to stop Takeda Nobishige moving on and capturing both Tajima and Tamba from the Ikko, 2 more provinces down. And finally, the Takeda gathered a huge army to engage in one final Kessen with the Ikko threat. Let's see how that goes. It was not that long ago that the leaders of Takeda were begging for our friendship. We both swore to alliance and to keep our ways separate, but they just had to goad their allies into fighting us so they could shatter our bonds, all because they had greedy eyes for the lands we won by hard battle. And now they occupy lands owned by the proud peasants of Japan without a thought of whether they're in the right. Well, brothers, today we shall show them who is right. We shall show them that to be wrong means to die. So, welcome back to the Eternal Law. We're with the Takeda in the winter of 1561, and the battle to decide who is going to win the war between the Takeda and the Ikko has just begun. You can see the Takeda army currently forming up on the field whilst its many reinforcements enter the battle. We have more reinforcements than the 40 regiment limit, so not all of the Takeda army is going to be available, which is going to give our enemy an advantage. You can see the battle is going to surely centre around this bridge. The enemy on the other side, the east side, we are on the west side. Here's the enemy army itself. They're scrambling into some sort of crazy formation. They themselves need to wait for their reinforcements to come onto the field before they can take any decisive action. So both armies are approximately equidistant from the bridge, so it seems there's going to be a slight race as to who's going to go and defend the bridge first, because if I can get across the bridge before they can defend it, I'll have a big advantage. You can see there more enemy forces rushing onto the field. Now up here on the north side of the map there is a ford across the river which I can potentially use, hopefully with these cavalrymen who have just come onto the field right on the north side. A reinforcement group consisting entirely of cavalry led by General Yamadera, so they are in a very good position to come across that field before the enemy actually go and defend it. However, you can tell from the enemy's formation already that they don't actually intend to defend that crossing point. They're forming up all of their men close to the bridge, but not actually close enough to stop me from coming over it at this point. Now, even though the Takeda army does have tons of cavalry in this battle, you can see from the enemy formation here, the Ikko have a cavalry armada that can easily match ours. They form them all up right along the back of their army. I guess they haven't decided what they're going to do with them yet, so they're holding them as a giant reserve force. You can see the sheer number of enemy heavy cavalry is outrageous. I think they probably match the Takeda contingent, at least the Takeda contingent on the north side. We do have some reserve cavalry, but I'm not really going to be using in this battle. But for the most part, Takeda's cavalry advantage is non-existent for this climatic battle. So, the opening moves of the battle finally need to happen. The first thing I decided to do was move all of the cavalry I had stationed on the south side of the map to link up with the north side. This would form a single group which could match with the enemy's cavalry should a giant cavalry melee be engaged. Now you can see I've actually crossed one unit over the river, these bow cavalry. I sort of just moved them over to see if the enemy would react to me gradually spilling my forces over the river crossing. My actual objective was to attempt to get the enemy to cross the river themselves, but as you can see I've moved my army close enough to the river to actually defend it. So in order to goad them into action, I started firing arrows into their front ranks using my bow cavalry. Here these unarmoured Ashigaru are going to take heavy losses from this bow fire. However, they didn't really care, and so upon seeing this I decided to just come across the bridge because it looked like I was going to have to take the battle to them, and I was just going to take the bridge out of the picture entirely by getting all of my men on the same side as the enemy. So I'm rushing across the bridge. This would be the perfect time for the enemy to attack, so I'm in a very vulnerable situation. Ideally I need to form up in a somewhat defensive formation on the other side of the bridge as soon as possible. So you can see I've ordered my men to form a very basic line formation just on the other side of the bridge to adopt whilst we get all of our forces across and before we come up with any sort of plan to advance in the Ikko formation. You can see that Ikko Ashigaru unit who I've been firing at finally are goaded into action by all these arrows after losing half of their men. But then they suddenly reconsider, and at the same time the entire enemy army springs into some form of action. I wasn't sure what they were doing, but this was very worrying, so I had to form up fast right on the edge of the bridgehead to make sure they didn't suddenly attack. However, it became clear quite quickly that their plan wasn't actually to attack my army. You can see what they've done is they've just rotated their entire formation. They're reforming the same formation, but now they're facing to the northwest. The reason is that they are aware I have a huge cavalry armada sitting all the way up here, and basically they're worried that these cavalry are going to come over the river and start attacking them from behind, so they've turned to make it harder for me to do that. A wise move, however. It now means it's harder for them to defend against my main force. So apparently they've decided my main force is not as important as the cavalry. Now you can see that as I was forming up, I actually got so close to the enemy formation that some of the archers began firing at each other. Here we have enemy's bow samurai firing against my bow cavalry and taking out a whole bunch of these heavy Naginata samurai running across the background there. Bad news, so I've moved forward some bow ashigaru to fire arrows into the enemy's bow samurai ranks. I'm also using my bow cavalry to try and whittle them down. I was willing to let this missile engagement go on as long as possible because I thought I would win. The enemy only have one missile unit in their entire army, and this is it. So I only have two, but that's enough to defeat these one and give me a missile advantage, which will mean once I've killed all these bow samurai, I can fire freely at the enemy's men without any fear of repercussions really. So I wanted to do that so you can start bombarding these bow samurai with arrows, and they're just taking it like men. They are focusing most of their fire on my central ranks now, trying to take out some of my katana samurai. You can see I've already killed their flag bearer, and their captain was just killed by arrows, so their morale is going to be dropping fast. I believe they'll soon break, even though they have their entire army there supporting them. You can see they have managed to deal a few casualties among these katana samurai, but these samurai were in fact only a reserve unit in my plan, so it doesn't really matter they're taking losses in this opening phase of the battle. So with those archers defeated, I was free to just fire arrows at whatever I wanted, so I decided to attack some of the enemy's no daichi samurai on their left flank, because these heavy units, well, I had nothing to counter them, so I thought they were the best way to invest my remaining arrows by taking some of these guys out. The problem was that the enemy weren't going to take that forever. Eventually they decided that they were bored of being hit by my arrows and decided to suddenly advance on my position, ordering their entire army to attack at once. However, because they were in a strange oblique formation, their left flank is going to attack me far before their right flank does. This could have given me an opportunity to maneuver somewhat. However, I was more focused on trying to get out of the way of their cavalry charge right here in the beginning. So these archers were caught up. I failed in my micromanagement, but the good news is the enemy are now caught on my long Yari Ashigaru here, so they're going to get eliminated. Now the enemy heavily attacked my right flank with their cavalry, and I basically had to send in reserves to this area immediately because they almost broke through my lines in their first charge. You see they're also sneaking around here to try and get behind my lines in the forest, but I had some hidden Naginata samurai who stopped the enemy's cavalry. I'm going to lock them in place fairly easily. The enemy cavalry shouldn't do very well against those heavy anti-cavalry units, but the enemy's heavy infantry are bearing down on my lighter infantry, so it looks like my right flank is in trouble. It's basically suffering the brunt of the enemy's attack. I believe some of the enemy's centre was actually redirected onto my right flank, so the enemy have a real strong presence here, and I'm just pushing in all my reserves straight away. I didn't want to move any of the rest of my formation in case the right flank broke, and I had to start folding my left flank around to the right just to keep things in a stable situation. Things are okay in the centre at least. The enemy's cavalry are being pushed back, and now my long Yari Ashigaru are engaging with the enemy's infantry, a mix of heavy and light infantry here in the centre, against which my men should do okay. They probably won't hold forever, but they can hold for a long time against light infantry because they just can't get through the spear wall. Here you can see some of the enemy's fire cavalry have broken almost completely through my lines, only held in by the patchwork of katana samurai moving in the reserves. Those katana samurai won't actually be very effective against those fire cavalry though, so I need to be careful. I came over the crest and saw the great bloody mess of battle. The men we were fighting were a mix of peasants, former subjects of the Kitabatake, and clean-armoured ronin fighting for the cause of a lordless realm. And there we were, standing ready to end the rebellion and bring freedom to the people once again. But it was not really freedom, for Shingen only cares for the annexation of rebel lands. Before he thought this possible, these rebels were our closest friends. But I'll do it this time, for the sake of duty. Now the good news coming out of the fact the enemy's cavalry are breaking through my main lines is that my own cavalry are pretty much free to come and maraud the enemy's rear. The enemy have tried to pull units out of their main line to distract my men, and they're going to do very well because a single regiment of spearmen can easily hold off many regiments of cavalry, or at least stop them from taking certain angles in their charges. Here you can see the enemy did send one unit of cavalry to try and engage with my cavalry, but it was only a light unit who I was eager to attack because I'll defeat them easily. Here, some Yari-Ashigaru, the same ones I was firing arrows at earlier in fact, were isolated right at the back, so I decided to just hit them with 5 regiments of cavalry and see if they could stand up to it. They are an anti-cavalry unit, so it's dangerous. I thought the sheer weight of my heavy charge should be enough to get rid of them. So what we really need to do is come and help out the situation over here, because the enemy both on the left, right and centre really have an advantage. Here on the right flank, pretty much all the men you can see here on the screen are enemy forces. Just a single line of Takeda men, 1 man thick, is stopping all these guys coming through and just destroying my formation. So I need to get over there as fast as I can and help them out. So I'm trying to rush cavalry, dodging around all the enemy's random units they have stationed in the rear guard to get in and attack them from behind. Here you can see my mounted gunners are playing a strong role to help the cavalry. Basically they're firing at all the enemy's anti-cavalry units from a distance to try and wear them down. So that's really the only way I can get rid of these anti-cavalry units out here. Here one of my units of fire cavalry was bogged down by such an anti-cavalry unit, so they're in trouble. I still have a main formation of cavalry out here led by General Yamadera, who are ready to charge in at a moment's notice. Here I've already defeated some of the enemy's cavalry, which means I now have a chance to rush for my own left and central flanks and hit the enemy from behind, which is good news. Here one of the enemy's generals is starting to be caught up in battle. However, I couldn't spend long fighting with them because I had to run away because the enemy were moving spear infantry to help out. So I had to abandon my little sneaky assassination attempt. But the good news is you can see here my cavalry are piling into the backs of the enemy ranks on the central left section of the line. And this is going to absolutely demoralize the enemy, reduce their numbers significantly, and mean I have a local numerical advantage, inspiring my men and leading to ultimate victory there in the center. I'm trying a similar tactic on the left flank, however, there on the left flank the enemy units are actually Naginata samurai. Extremely hard for me to kill them with cavalry, but it's worth a go, at least for the morale shock. Over on my right flank, I'm sending in some cavalry to engage here with one of the enemy's generals, who is sneaking through these trees, trying to exploit a gap that had opened up by the death of some of my Naginata samurai, but I was there just in time to take them out. The enemy are now locked in combat with my horses, and they will inevitably lose. Those generals' bodyguards are quite weak against fire cavalry and the like, which is what I'm sending in there. Back over on the left flank, you can see I've cycle charged back into the Naginata samurai. The only way I can damage them is by charging, not by melee combat, so I'm forcing my horsemen to go in and out. The same thing in the center, in and out, constantly charging, attempting to destroy the enemy's morale and their numbers without taking too heavy losses to my own cavalry by getting bogged down. Here I was allowing my cavalry to get bogged down because they were winning, but I had to get out of the way because more Naginata samurai just appeared and began to engage them. I still have a cavalry reserve led by Yamadera himself, which is ready to move in, basically just waiting for a chance to exploit some weakness in the enemy. Back over here you can see I'm still fleeing from enemy spearmen, but the good news is I am now beginning to lead a lot of the enemy units away from the battle, which is weakening their main line. Here you can see I did a very glorious charge with my Onabushi cavalry against the enemy's Nodaichi samurai. Those Nodaichi samurai will stand no chance against these elite mounted women who are going to be slashing them down with their katanas. Very good news for us because we're eliminating one of the enemy's heavy units. It was very unlikely that I'd get this chance to do so, so I was glad to be able to use the one unit I have that's actually good against Nodaichi samurai to engage them. I believe I actually managed to take out 2 of the enemy's regiments of Nodaichi samurai using this technique, which is excellent news. Very good play from the Onabushi there in battle. So what's happening at the back now? The enemy's still rushing units around, but the actual main battle is beginning to go in my favour. You can see here on the left flank, the Takeda men have almost completely overwhelmed the enemy. In the central area it's a similar situation. I've actually charged cavalry in from the reserve commanded by Nobukado on the other side of the bridge. You can see there's still more coming over the bridge at the moment to fill out the reserve. Basically I ran out of reserve infantry, so I started using cavalry to plug the gaps in the line. And because those cavalry are fairly good in melee, they actually started pushing the enemy back quite well. You can see here in the centre, Takeda now have a numerical advantage. The situation has changed quite a lot from a couple of minutes ago. It looked like the Ikko are about to completely demolish our lines. They do have a lot of warrior monks here still fighting, however they lose morale, which is very unusual for warrior monks, and start fleeing, and basically a chain rout ensues. Most of the enemy troops are now attempting to escape the battlefield, but I have tons of cavalry behind their lines who aren't going to let them escape. There are still a few enemy units who have not committed to routing and are going to fight on, so it means the rest of the battle just involves me hunting down those units. I believe it's a few Nodaishi samurai. These Naginata samurai are another example. You can see I've dismounted my Onobushi cavalry to come and deal with them on foot, so it's another chance for glory for these warrior women of the Takeda clan, and they're doing extremely well against these Naginata samurai. Naginata samurai are weak against exactly this sort of attack, and so after taking some strong losses, the enemy start trying to retreat, and the Onobushi aren't going to let that happen and start hunting them down. But really, this is victory for the Takeda clan, a decisive victory over the final major Ikko Ikki threat. I believe that after this defeat, the enemy have only a single stack of troops left across all of their armies, which is excellent news. However, the bad news is that the Takeda men, of course, bore the brunt of this victory. You can see here on the front lines, depleted regiments standing over the copious bodies of their comrades. So let's head back to the strategy map and look at the battle results screen, see what really happened. It looks like we lost a couple of thousand men, with the enemy losing a couple of thousand more. Overall, an okay result. We lost a few regiments in Nobukado's army who were on the front lines there. Some of the reinforcements going down as well. A lot of these regiments actually didn't even get it onto the battlefield because of that regiment limiter I talked about earlier. But anyway, the enemy army is gone. However, the enemy's daimyo and I believe his son, who were part of the army, survived, and they escape into Owari, which I can't really allow because these men, of course, will just incite more rebellions. So let's head over with this small garrison force. I believe these guys were left over from putting down the Buddhist rebellion in Owari in the last Takeda episode. So they're just going to go in and take out this other form of rebels, the Ikko Ikki. The enemy had a few samurai with them, nothing that could stop this fairly large army. So we took them down with 0 losses, not too bad. Though of course whenever you defeat an enemy daimyo, another daimyo usually just spawns at whatever their capital is. So we'll still have to fight another Ikko Ikki Grand Commander again, but I don't think we'll ever see sorts of army sizes we've seen before. We've weakened them so much, and their economy simply isn't up to snuff to rebuild an army. I believe they only have 3 or 4 provinces left. I think it's 3. One of them is currently under siege by the Date far in the east, and the other one, the one in Tango, is probably going to get attacked by Nobushige pretty soon. So they're in a bad way. Also in a bad way is that army that I sabotaged in the last Takeda episode. This bulk of Ikko Ikki reinforcements, who I can simply gang up on, who were the survivors from the grand battle, and take out with ease, going in with an auto result since I had such a huge advantage. See, the enemy here had some no Taichi samurai, extremely powerful units, but they're not going to be able to do anything against my sheer numerical advantage, so we've got rid of them, and I'm glad not to have had to face them in the battle we just saw, otherwise things might have been just a bit too difficult to deal with. Nobukado, who led the attack, leveled up there. Nobukado is now an extremely high level general. His men will have super high morale bonuses as a result. The bad news is that I couldn't get Nobukado to go down and attack the Kitabatake lands, which the Ikko Ikki are occupying at the moment, and of course occupied right in the beginning of this war. That was the opening move from them, was to capture that province. And so instead of actually going on the offensive for the rest of the turn, I'm moving my troops to safety to restore my numbers. The battle we all expected was yesterday. It was the whole Ikko army, so I'm sure father and brother were with them, but I didn't see much of the fighting myself. I was behind the lines of fighting, and I never really had any idea what was happening until suddenly there was a great cheer as it appeared the Ikko men were fleeing. I can only hope their loved ones escaped. I expect you will not hear from them until the Takeda army moves on. I'd give anything for this war to just leave our people alone. So now we're looking at the next end turn sequence. It looks like the Shoni are up to no good. You can see them moving forces around near where Shingen is positioned, even moving a force down near to Yamato Castle. It appears they're planning to threaten our western domain. It looks like the Shogun are up to no good once again. That damned monk has caused another insurrection, this time in Umi, and the rebels in Mino have decided to go and sabotage some of my agriculture. Annoying, but they don't have enough men to have done real damage, so it's not too bad. So now if I wade through all that bad news, we can see what the Shogun have done. They've got one army hiding in the forest near Key. It's not clear whether they actually intend to attack the castle, but I think if they did, they would not win, so I'm not worried about that. There's also a Shogun navy, a single ship which is blockading all of my trade, so I had to send the Takeda navy just to push them out the way to make sure my income for the next turn doesn't get damaged. We've easily dealt with them. So now I wanted to deal with those rebels in Mino. I'm going to end that rebellion before I start trying to deal with the next rebellion over in Umi. I'm sending this army from Owari to basically just chase them down. I'm going to dedicate this army to hunting down the rebels. They can keep running away and I'll keep chasing them, and eventually I'll surely defeat them. In Owari you can see they still have a public order bonus from the defeat of the last rebellion, which basically means I don't need to leave many troops there at the moment. I'm free to move my troops wherever I want, and I want to move Nobukado down into Ise to capture the castle from the Ikko Iki. The castle itself has no standing army and just a small garrison, which means it will be an easy assault for Nobukado's forces, and this in turn means I don't really need to send Nobukado's reinforcement army to go and help him. So instead I'm going to send those guys over towards Umi to go and hang out with the rebel army, which is now sitting right next to the castle. Whilst they're on the move, I'm going to auto-resolve the assault on Ise province. Nobukado should win an easy victory because the balance of power is very much in our favour, and he does just over 100 losses and just over 1,000 kills. Not bad at all. Now I could have just occupied Ise, however I wanted to actually restore the Kitabatake clan to their previous lands, because this will be a sign that the Takeda clan really does fight for its allies, which is an image we need to get across, since this whole war with the Ikko Iki hasn't really helped our personal honour. So by restoring them, we give up the lands that we just conquered back to the Kitabatake clan, and they automatically agree to be our vassals from now on. They also give us a free unit of Naginata Ashigaru as a gift, very nice of them. So now I'm just going to abandon their lands and move Nobukado to the west towards Yamato, where it looks like the Shogun are trying to attack, so surely I'll need his forces there soon. Now back in Umi, it's finally time to address the rebels. I attempted to attack them and they retreated. They retreated to the other side of the castle, but because of the arrangements of the castle and the agents, I don't have enough movement points between my two armies to have both of them attack the enemy at the same time, which means I can't gain a definitive advantage over them. I probably could defeat them by attacking them with just one army, because the enemy has so many Ashigaru, they would surely rout into any sort of focused attack, but I decided to just leave it for now and deal with the Shogun army sitting here in the northern part of Yamato province. I'm using Shingen and our new general, with Shingen leading the attack. We have a huge advantage and the enemy are determined to stand their ground, which means I'm simply going to auto-resolve my way to victory. The enemy army there full of Nodaichi samurai and Naginata samurai with a ton of upgrades, but they can't stop us. We completely eradicate the enemy force there, getting rid of a level 2 Shogun general in the process, always good news. And now I have more movement points, so I can think about dealing with this next Shogun army before they try and attack Yamato, or perhaps go and reinforce their allies in Ki and steal the province from us. So Shingen is going to move down the road and displace the Shogun forces, and now he doesn't quite have enough movement points to actually go and attack them again. What he can do though is get close enough to be in a reinforcement zone for the army coming out of Yamato Castle here. So now, even though my initial army is smaller than the enemy's, by virtue of my reinforcements I have a huge advantage on the balance bar, and so by auto-resolving this conflict again, we can easily brush aside that Shogun army. So the possible Shogun invasion has been very easily crushed, a true sign that the Takeda strength is growing and growing. There's almost nothing for us to defeat those Shogun armies. Now I'm going to send these troops from Yamato over to Ki to guard the province, so that that final Shogun army can't possibly attack the castle and take it. So things are now looking pretty safe. I'm going to start moving Shingen back towards Kawachi, because soon we're going to have to go and assault some of the Shogun forces in the west. And I decided I would see whether I could attack them right now, and it turns out I can, because Setsu is defended by only a very small army. So I'm moving in to besiege it. I have a very small advantage in terms of power balance. The enemy does have a reasonable force inside, and I only have a very inexperienced general leading a not particularly well balanced selection of troops, so I wasn't sure I wanted to go to the assault right away, and since I have the leisure of a strong position, I decided I would wait. And I'm also going to apply that attitude to the rebel army. I'd rather have them attack me and waste their strength attempting to get into my castle. So we're going to wait and simply let our power grow. It is true that they're using our lack of action against the Reino Ikki supporters as a rallying cry, But these Buddhist rebels aren't fighting over religious issues. The truth is that they wish to have the monk peasant rulers of the Ikko days, only with the true Shinto faith. They grew quickly used to a life where the samurai aren't making decisions, my lord. Clearly they're in the wrong, but I fear it will take a long time to persuade them of this. But I think they would stop if you were to become shogun. So now we turn our attention to the north side of Takeda's new domain, where it looks like Nobushige is going to be quite able to simply march down into the Ikko-Iki lands and take what is their final stronghold. I had a Metsuge standing in the road who was scouting the area, so I have to get him out of the way. Nobushige is coming down and attacking this one unit of enemy matchlock Ashigaru who are just for some reason trying to defend the road outside the castle. My men will simply destroy them in an auto-resolve. It is interesting that Ikko-Iki have matchlock Ashigaru because it's an incredibly difficult unit to get in the game, so I guess that means they must have been really pushing their technology towards guns in the end there, but it didn't help them because they've lost everything else. They don't really have a chance to make any use of it. Unfortunately, Nobushige couldn't actually attack the castle. He just lacked enough movement points to take it. Now here you can see there is actually still a small Ikko army hanging around near the capital with 2 generals and a bunch of heavy samurai. So let's see if they do anything in the end turn sequence. Well, it looks like they were going to attempt to attack Kawachi, but then they just about ran out of movement points before they could attack the castle. So running out of movement points has spited both of our clans, and now it looks like the rebels in Umi did exactly what I wanted them to do. They attacked the castle where I have tons of forces, General Yamadera leading the defense, and they were completely wiped out. So it looks like my plan of just waiting for them to attack worked out quite well. The rebels in Mino bypassed my army and appear to be going towards the castle, which is a bad idea because they're actually sandwiching themselves between the castle garrison and my troops, so they're now in trouble. Another massive set of bad news, and among these sets of bad news is news regarding the lack of public order in some of my provinces. It's because all of these lands I've been taking from the Ikko forces are suffering from religious unrest because we're a Buddhist clan and most of the people actually prefer the Ikko-Iki religious sect. So what I need to do is use a mixture of exemption from taxes and increasing the garrisons in the local areas to try and calm things down. With that happening in the background, it's time for me to finally destroy that rebel army in Mino. I'm moving my official rebel destroying army in to attack them. I'm not using any of the forces in Mino's garrison because I don't actually need them in this case. And the enemy force is wiped out, so that means the public order in Mino is going to be good for a while. More good news, one of the men in that rebel destroying force has been promoted to general and he's extremely loyal as well. So we now have another new general to join our recently acquired new general to go and fight on the western front against the Shoni. So hopefully they'll do some good. And now speaking of doing good, I'm sending my ninja against that damned shogunate monk who keeps inciting those rebellions. I wasn't able to kill him, but I have wounded him, which means for the next few turns he won't be able to take any actions. So we are safe against those damn rebellions for a short while. Now I decide to move General Yamadera from Umi, freshly having defeated the Umi rebels, to go and attack the last Ikko-Iki army. But then something I've never ever seen in Shogun Total War 2 happened. Yamadera betrayed the Takeda as we came into the attack and went over to the Ikko-Iki side, so now he fights for the enemy and our army does not have a general. I believe he took with him some fire cavalry here and some Naginata Ashigaru who also betrayed our cause along with him. So this is an incredible twist. It means this battle, which I thought was going to be really easy, is now actually worth fighting and could even be challenging. So hopefully we'll get some revenge on the traitor Yamadera in the next Takeda episode. That's all for this episode, but to see Nobuhide and Nobunaga face a rotten surprise, tune in next time to the Eternal Law.